To our last session for this morning, we are joined by the amazing Dave Wilde. Dave is someone that I've known for a few years now. He always pushes and pulls me into the future in a way that I love, and certainly his whole theme around mind flex is going to, and flexing your mind is going to really push us in a nice way into the future after Don Price's session this morning. And for people that don't know Dave, Dave is a creative futurist living on the edge of the world in New Zealand. He's presented on stage and screen across the globe, and from South Auckland to Sydney to San Francisco. He's got a really unique approach to a futurist, and particularly applies that in facilitating strategy sessions and coaching and creating future-ready leaders at organizations such as Microsoft, Toyota, and the Red Cross. Dave's fantastic at just helping you see the future more clearly. So that's where we're going to go. And in particular, how to mind flex rather than just have a mindset. So Dave, I'm going to hand over to you. Welcome. Thank you so much for doing this session today.
Brilliant. Thanks, Julia. It all begins with an idea. And first of all, I'd like to acknowledge Julia. So Julia's a visionary. She saw possibilities, but she didn't just think about it, she created something. And that's what enables us all to come together in this sort of way. So this is the work that we're going to be doing today. Now, at this point, you might be going, but work? I thought I was just going to come along and listen to some things. And you can do that if you choose to. But to get the most out of it, about halfway through, it'll become quite an active working session. We'll just ease into things. So the first thing I'd like you to do is take a look at your future. So this circle represents your future. If you could put into the chat what you can see. And you might be going, am I going to get more instructions? No, not at this stage, because I'm not wanting to lead you. So whatever you see is correct, is right. Hope, this is awesome. Freedom, perfection, challenge. Okay, now the critical question, and keep adding into that chat there, which one of those answers is correct? Are you thinking, oh, well, my one's obviously the correct one? So here's the challenge with being a visionary. It's easy to have a personal vision, but how do you lead others? How do you inspire them further? More hours not at work. Well, actually, hold on, just through this door here, I think there might be some desks, you know, what can we kind of see on the other side? Well, the other thing you can see if you look at this is where we are today. So we're here at VID. Now, VID enables us to shift space, to get together. How do we do that? We do that through the ability to flex your mind. So to imagine, hey, I'm not just in my office, I'm connected with other people. And we're really going to look at in this session, how do you use the ability to flex your mind in order to shape your future? Because I love the way that Julia has kind of acknowledged that, hey, we've been through some challenging times, we're still in some challenging times, but the future is what's really critical. So let's put that energy towards that. Now, why mind flex? That's what I'm going to begin with. And if everyone drops off after the first part, then I can tell I haven't convinced you of the importance of mind flexing. But as a futurist, I'm going to make an assumption that you'll see the importance of mind flexing. I'm then going to share with you 4 mind flexes. So there are 4 distinct ways to flex your mind in. At the end, we'll share a toolkit that's got a mind flex guide that will capture all of the key learnings in here. But it's not enough just to think differently. Again, if you think of the work that Julia did with VID, she didn't just think differently, she acted differently. So these 4 mind flexes actually build out to a set of 8 future-ready skills. But I'm going to focus in on the future-ready skill of how to vision. Then at the end, as I mentioned, there's a toolkit with some things to help you explore the future. and also happy to have more of a conversation around things. So if we now look forward into that future, the question becomes, why MindFlex? You can look at the environment we're operating in, and this environment existed pre-pandemic times. So the modern leadership environment, we're dealing with volatility, things move faster. You have to ask, why do they move faster? It's because we're more connected than ever before. Technology continuously shifts. And don't think technology means digital. So a piece of paper is technology, but it is constantly shifting on us. But now, because we're more connected than ever, the social pressures on leaders are increased because that has far higher visibility, far higher expectations. So operating in this kind of environment requires a different way of working. Now, I asked Julie and Sarah before the session to see if they could get hold of everyone's performance reviews over the past few years, and it's been passed to me, and we've ranked all of your performance here. And I'm just about to put names below each of these bars. Notice what's happening to your mind now. Are you going, once you get over the privacy issues, are you going, well, I really hope my score's up here because I wouldn't want to be down here? But if you think about how this works, that's where history repeats. That's what's proven to work. But the future doesn't begin in a big bang. It actually begins on the edges and it builds forward. So this is this mind-flexing ability to see things that others don't. If you now start to think of it at a neuroscience level, right now, there's thoughts firing up in your brain. So across your synaptic connections, these electrical impulses are happening. What happens though, is that they travel over well-worn pathways. Think of it just like, for example, a roading network. So we have similar thoughts, we work in similar ways, and we have thoughts that don't make sense to us. Even in this presentation, you're probably taking notes using confirmation bias, going, yes, I agree with these synaptic connections, as opposed to going, maybe that's different, maybe there's another way of operating. So mind flexing is all about how do you make use of this area of your brain? And as a leader, how do you make use of all of these areas and the other areas? So critical to it is not to think with your mind. Because if you think about it, your mind is this large, the world is a lot larger. So it's about how do you connect in with all those other thoughts, all those other possibilities around you. Again, I love how this is really a depiction of VID. It's the ability to say, even though we're not physically in the same space, how do we grab these new ideas, these new possibilities from all around us? Now, if we look at this thing of shifting mindsets, and it's hard enough to shift your own mindset, it's even more difficult to shift other people's. So I do a lot of strategy facilitation work, a lot of coaching, and nothing can be more difficult often than a chairperson or a board member's mindset. They're at a point in their career where they're there because of their wisdom and their knowledge and their experience. And when I first started facilitating, I'd spend all day trying to challenge, trying to move people forward. Then I realized we haven't got time to do that because we need to solve difficult problems. So it was developing this ability to mind flex at speed, get people to understand how to shift and why it's so important. So we know the theory of going from a fixed mindset, in this case to a growth mind flex. But how often do we actually do it? Here's an example. What leadership now requires is not people versus tech, but people with tech. And it's how we're using it now, but at the same time, people will talk about things like Zoom fatigue and the need for a digital detox. And that starts to set up some of this versus stuff. I'm not saying not to step away from the screens, but I'm saying just to think of it as part of the infrastructure you're working with. If I ask you a question now, what does AI stand for? People could just pop that into the chat. What does AI stand for? You weren't warned there was going to be a test, and what we just do is ask people to leave if you get this answer incorrect, but don't feel any pressure. Just to repeat the question, AI, great. So some correct answers coming through. Brilliant. And I love the question marks at the end. Notice that bit of mind flexing that's going on there. So the ability to say, hey, well, a fixed mindset says AI stands for artificial intelligence, but that's people versus tech. There's another meaning for AI, and that's augmented intelligence, and that's people with tech. So I will pause a meeting where you're talking in an echo chamber and go, couldn't we use technology to ask this question outside of the room? Again, same thing we're doing here in chat and a webinar, but you start to scale that principle up. Now, the past is all about demanding certainty, but we live in an age where we have to guide through uncertainty. And it's not as simple as saying the only thing you can be certain of is that there is uncertainty, but it does have an element of going, well, here are the things that we can be sure of. So our purpose as an organization hasn't shifted, but how we deliver it is flexing and changing on us. Then there's this thing of decide by experience. And by the way, experience is another word for bias. And that's a really controversial statement from Vinod Khosla, founder of Sun Microsystems, worth reflecting on. So actually, what we're now doing is exploring by collaborating. That's why you're seeing the shift to agile, to design thinking, but those methodologies in themselves are more than a decade old. So the world continues to shift and change. It's no longer about dictating the correct rules. Instead, you need to include diverse perspectives. So we will literally, as we build presentations or do work, reach out with clients, show them things on screen, ask them their thoughts, and change words live. That ability to collaborate in the way that you work, which ultimately leads to a shift from protecting the status quo to creating the future. And so that's the shift we're looking to make from that fixed mindset over to this growth mind flex. But that was a lot of words, and a picture can say 1,000 words. So I want to express it like this. Why mind flex? Because this is what the future feels like to many people. And I was talking about this before the pandemic, because this is what technology, what AI, what changes in jobs feel like. But now if you layer on top of it, pandemic, remote working, people want to stay where they are, stick with the status quo because they feel they're being asked to step out into this uncertainty. The answer is not to say, don't worry, I've got a plan, I can give you certainty, because you can't. What you can do is mind flex for yourself and mind flex for others in order to shape your future together. And I want to get you to have a look at this version of uncertainty, where everything's chaotic and unpredictable, and contrast it with this version here, where that change opens up possibilities. It creates opportunities where they didn't exist before. So it's how do you work as a leader? How do you work as a team? How do you develop a strategy that creates this type of shift? Ultimately, it's about changing from having a mindset. So when I first started doing this work, and Julie was chatting about sort of the evolution of this work, now I've written the word mindset because we all needed new mindsets and different mindsets. And then I realized the problem is actually with the word set. Set means fixed in a specified place or position. So imagine if I was set while giving this presentation, kind of you wouldn't get too much out of it. So instead of having a mindset, what I have to do is have the ability to flex, because flex means to bend, to move or stretch in order to exercise. Flexing isn't a sign of weakness. Contrast it to so many things in life, and that is where the strength comes, whether it's in a tree, whether it's in an earthquake, whether it's in yoga, the ability to flex. But most people don't think like this. I was just working with a tech team on visioning for their product. One of the things I was coaching the founder on is you don't have to have the vision all on your own. You actually want to bring the team along and vision with them. But it's not about decision by committee, because that's where you won't have an inspiring vision. If you just go, what do we all agree on? Think of it like that bell curve. You're just pushing back to what's already known. So I had to coach people that have strong ideas, but lightly held, the ability to flex forward. So flexing your mind, 4 mind flexes. If you only remember one word from this session, and I'm about to just put it into your mind by asking you to type this into the chat. And I apologize that this feels like rote learning, but what I've learned is that so many people learn new ways of working and they don't apply them. Because I have yet to be in a meeting where someone goes, well, that's a really difficult challenge. I learned an interesting technique to help deal with that. Let me go get my notes and get my handout. And even though they all carry devices, none of them go, let me just look in my email for that PDF. They just operate with what's in their mind. So this hour, your challenge is just to learn one word. And that single word is the word leap. If I could get you just to type it into the chat. Brilliant. So I like the way that's gone in there. Now, it's a little bit hard in that I'm into innovation and creativity. So feel free to play with that word a little bit too. So you can reorder the letters, because mind flexing doesn't mean it has to work in a particular order. But hold on to that word leap, because what it stands for is 4 different modes of moving your thinking around. And those 4 different modes run on 2 axes. So the first is this axis where we're stepping forward into the future. Beginning in the past. And you remember when I said beginning in the past? Because that's now in the past. So we're constantly living in the present, looking forward to the future. And the ability to create the future also depends on things like standing on the shoulders of giants. So acknowledging the past, being in the moment in the present, but that enables you to create the future. So we're operating on this axis here. And that's using leverage thinking and progressive thinking. Then we also need a vertical axis. And that vertical axis is kind of like letting your mind run up to the sky, but also having feet on the ground. So going for ideas that feel impossible, that other people go, oh no, that would never work. But going, how could I make it work? How might I make it work? Then turning it into the possible. So actually thinking by doing. And that's where impact lies, in the middle between those. So for part of that reason, I really hope that most of you are kind of only half listening to me at the moment. You're sort of looking out the window, you're thinking about Tom's opening presentation, about the guidance Julia gave in the morning about how to shape our future, and you're sort of connecting all of those ideas together. But I also hope you don't spend your time going through VID and then dropping back into your past habits and your past patterns. So I'm also going to be asking you to keep a lookout for just one thing out of this session that connects with you, that you're going to take forward. So if we look at this different mode, these different ways of working, and say, okay, how do I actually apply that? How do I make that happen? It's this. It's very core. You can take all of that complexity of learning and go, this is mind flexing. I once did skydiving, and you spent half a day learning how to do skydiving and all the different techniques and stuff like that. And then you jumped out of the plane and went, oh yeah, I forgot to do all of that stuff. Because experienced skydivers, it just becomes instinctual. Same thing here, if you've ever learned to drive a car. People didn't say, just go for it. They gave you lots of confusing instructions, but over time, it just became natural. So mind flexing is the ability to push your mind like this. So we're quite good with the chat. I reckon we can step it up a level, and we might even kind of go mics. And I don't mind if you're using webcams for this part as well. So Julia, we can feel free to sort of drop out in a moment out of spotlight view. I just want to show you this one image here, because this is mind flexing in action. Yes, it's a metaphor, but also it's actual mind flexing. So let's just use mics, but you can also use the chat if you're not wanting to unmic, and go, how is this like mind flexing? By the way, for facilitation coaching, I just use silence. So I'll keep out of this and let the group go. Go for it.
You need to adapt and navigate the river as you go, and the conditions are different every time you go onto the white water.
That's fantastic, Sarah. Now I have to reveal that Andrea works with me, who's also on this call. Andrea, could you just take Sarah's brilliance there and make a note of it? So next time we present, I will go. It is like navigating. Brilliant. What else?
Responding to change.
Can you chat to that a little bit more? I love it.
So with every paddle comes a new patch of water and the unknown. And it's being comfortable with that unknown that you're going to travel through to the end, maybe a bit bumpily, but hopefully in overall safely. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And so I love the comment, that's what my year looked like, navigating through the unknown. If we're honest, I think it's not just the past year, it's most of our life and it's our life ahead, right? So being comfortable, being uncomfortable is, again, one of those phrases that's good in theory, it's really difficult to do. One of the things that we've learned in working with teams is you think about times when you're paddling, you've got to say, hey, it's okay, let's go into quieter waters for a while, right? Let's catch our breath. Then let's flex forward. But sometimes it's taking that disruption, those opinions that don't agree with you and leaning into them and digging into that shift and that change. Now, that's about mind flexing. Again, this is just sort of a top level to give you an understanding of how to push your mind around. Just like kind of learning, for example, a martial art, someone doesn't go, well, you just do this, you do this, you do that, and you'll be sorted. But if you don't have an understanding of the movements and slow it down, you can't even understand what's happening. But once your minds are flexing, you then need to take that skill out into the world because that has an impact through action. So sitting alongside the 4 mind flexes are the 8 futurity skills. And these 8 futurity skills give you the ability to be visionary, to be strategic, to look forward, but also to be far more inclusive of other people's ideas, but using digital to do it. And it's not the reason that I did it, but for example, can you see how the interaction with Sarah there gave me far more information? I used digital to do it, and it becomes a more inclusive leadership style. And it's a critical point because I'm seeing far too many people thinking diversity and inclusion is about stepping away from devices. Yes, at times you need to, but they're actually an amazing way to get more ideas. Wikipedia isn't technology, it's not a platform, it's people all over the world contributing ideas. Ultimately, that gives you a platform to enable you to be more innovative by being more collaborative. And collaborative is not a synonym for teamwork. Too many people talk about it like it is. But if you think back, for example, in the war, who did collaborateurs work with? They conspired with the enemy. So collaboration is actually about working with people that make you uncomfortable to be working with them. Customers that we work with will have beautiful slides that say we are customer centric and a picture of the customer in the middle. And we'll go, awesome. So how many customers are coming to the strategic workshop? No, we're not doing that. Oh, what about if we invited something? Yeah, sounds great. But then it becomes scary. So this mind flexing enables it to not be scary, to have ways of stepping forward into it. Being adaptive. So I love that, Nosh. So for example, can I get you to unmute? I prefer co-creation versus collaboration. Really
Sure.
like that thought. Can you just
Sure.
share that?
My experiences with collaboration have been 1 or 2 people in a group work more than the others, whereas in co-creation, everyone understands the responsibility and they work towards it. So they've got their own smaller goals towards a bigger shared goal to achieve. That's the reason why I prefer co-creation versus collaboration. I've been in far too many projects where I've ended up working harder than the others. Or that's what I feel, hence why co-creation.
Right.
And it also fosters the accountability and people thinking as well.
Yeah, the thing I'm just not certain of, is your Zoom playing up? Because my slide clearly says co-creation. So
love it.
So this is the thing, right? We love to talk about agility and then we have long, slow moving meetings, or we love to talk about being challenged, but then we hold on to our ideas. Now, for me to make that switch and change, I had to take a risk because I kind of went, oh my gosh, I'm probably going to lose my background. It's not going to come back. But see that ability. So this isn't just about VID. This isn't just about webinars. It's every meeting you have. So I will lead executive teams out of their board meeting to talk to staff to gain ideas during the meeting. takes no more time, but shifts the way that we're working. So that's that idea of mind flexing. Now, our focus today is going to be around progressive thinking, because we're here to shape our future. Now, you can see there how important all those other modes are to doing it, but you begin with this idea of looking forward. And I love how people have contradictory viewpoints. So there's kind of a debate within methodologies around a school of thinking with design thinking, where it might begin with empathy and what is the customer's challenge, what's their deep unmet needs, versus, hang on, to be a visionary leader, you have to begin with your own idea. People will like to cite famous sayings, like, for example, that Henry Ford, right? What did he invent? Not faster cars, not faster horses, but it was cars. But he had to know that people wanted to travel faster. So the ability to have empathy and understand people in a leveraged way enables you to shape your opinion. But I have seen teams get lost in their empathy unpacks, the ideas, the possibilities, because they didn't begin with a vision. They didn't have a clear strategy. So this is your opportunity coming into VID. You know, what are you focused on creating? Where are you headed? Now, we're going to focus on the Futurity skill of being visionary, but I'll give you a bit of side coaching that will make you a more strategic thinker. And I can do this in 1 minute. I have sat in so many meetings where people will say, we need to be more strategic. We need to develop a strategy. Yes, key to being a great leader is to be strategic. But if you pause them and said, great point, what does strategy mean? Most people couldn't answer you. Even though they could say, hey Siri, hey Alexa, what does strategy mean? So take an everyday word, whether it's service, whether it's quality, dive into the dictionary, because it's like understanding an engine, pulling it apart, and then you can make it more high performance. So one meaning of strategy is it's a plan of action to achieve major aims. So you're not being strategic if you're leaving meetings without actions, but you're getting too tactical if the actions are related to small aims or you didn't even establish the aims. So what are the major aims? So this is where being visionary is about those major aims. Now, again, there's different schools of thought where some people like using the words vision, purpose, mission, values. Other people go, oh, those are very old concepts. We don't need to be so constrained. All of these are just human languaging and constructs to try and understand the world. My personal perspective is that all of those things help because it's like having a map. But far too often the terms vision, purpose, and mission get used interchangeably, and they're not. They are very different concepts. So vision is about having clarity of where we're heading. Now, I don't know if anyone experienced this last year. We went, oh, I thought I knew where I was heading, but now that way is blocked. And I still want to get there, but I have to get there in a different way. But so many people didn't know in the first place where they're actually trying to head. So vision is about being able to clarify for your team, for your organization, and for yourself. What are we out to achieve? And it's not a vague, we will be number one in our industry through happy staff, customers, and shareholders, because that is not a vision. That is just a metric, generic human goal. Vision means to see. So we're going to be doing visioning to see into that future. Now, the difference here with purpose is that goal's not easy to achieve. And if you think about what happened, is this an organization doesn't have a sense of purpose, people will go, what do you want me to change the way that I'm working? I just want things to go back to the way that they were. Whereas if you're driven by a strong sense of purpose, you'll go, that's a difficult goal to achieve, but I know why we're trying to do it and I'm going to push forward. And there's a subtlety between the difference between purpose and mission. So purpose is why you do it, mission is what you're on to achieve it. At a certain point, you end up with too many concepts, right? When people say I'm a values-driven organization, I know not to ask them what their values are, because even the chief people officer will typically get to their third value and then go, I know there's a fourth one as well. It's kind of like juggling, right? You can maybe use 3 concepts to guide you. Have you ever driven in conditions like this? And I don't just mean when it's raining, I mean when it's so wet, you are on the road, the rain came out of nowhere and you shouldn't be traveling. But you're committed to getting wherever it is you want to get to. So you carry on driving. Think about your senses. What happens? Critical question I'm going to ask you here, and let's use the chat for this one. Do you go faster or slower in these kind of conditions? So in these kind of conditions, do you travel faster or slower? Slower with excitement though, slower, depends on the traffic around you. You're getting a sense of this mind flexing? So I'm often leading you to a particular answer, but it's going, hang on, life's more nuanced than that. This is what happened in pandemic times. This is what happens when technology changes. This is what, when anything predictable. Too many people go, we just better slow down, or we better pull off to the side and wait for the rain to pass. And some organisations might need to do that, but most of them need to keep moving. So you think about how you apply your skills. You need to be a better driver. In our case, we need to be a better thinker. And it's by seeing these signals around us. So you imagine traveling in this kind of condition versus that kind of condition. So I used to think the role of a futurist was to help clear that windscreen and tell you exactly what was going to be ahead. You might have even come along to this session hoping that that's what you're going to get out of it. But you can never see entirely clearly, and it's constantly changing. But if you can learn from a futurist how to see the signals that are all around you. So notice how I could have left some of the controversial opinions alone in the chat and gone, yes, well, I'm the expert, I've got the clicker here, they'll just ignore that, and it's all about collaboration. But instead, what you can do is go, hey, that could be a signal of change. And it was a great conversation, giving deeper insight into how things are changing. Sometimes it's seeing large organisations, what other governments are doing, those shifts and changes. But sometimes it's spotting roads that you didn't even know were off to the side because you missed the startup. So we'll take CEOs and collide them with students to have conversations about the future. However, it's not about their future. It's about your future. So what I'd like you to do, you can work on a bit of paper, you can work on a tablet, but I'm going to get you to do a bit of writing and I'll get you to do a bit of drawing. Now we're going to do it in a blended way because I'd quite like some of the stuff to come through into the chat as well so that other people can see some of your thinking. So the first questions I'll ask you, you're able to put them into the chat, but then don't lose sight of them as they scroll up off the screen. So make a note for yourself. So we're going to go through 4 steps to being visionary. The first one is focus on a specific goal. This is the connection between vision and strategy. What are you actually trying to achieve? So often if I do innovation coaching and ask people, why are you here today? They'll go to think outside of the box. Now I have to go, brilliant, about what? So what I'm going to ask you here is there is no right or wrong, but shaping your future, what aspect of your future do you want to shape? It could be as specific as a project you're currently working on. It could be a product that you're responsible for. It could be the overall shape of your business. It could be an aspect of your own life. Or it could be, what is the meaning of my life? Now, that's going to be a big challenge. The smaller it is, the more progress you can make, but it needs to be what's important to you. So can I get people just to share in the chat, what's a goal you're working on? And if it feels too deeply personal, just put a false goal in the chat and then work in secret on your bit of paper. So you've come to VID. You're giving up your valuable, precious time. Right, loving it, Richard. My balcony garden. As a futurist, I predicted that would be, so I won't make any further predictions. Okay, we've all got so many things that we're working on. The brilliant thing is, as you read in the chat, you can resonate with them. You can see yourself in them. So I'll get a few more examples through in the chat. Everyone needs to have a specific goal. Right. Now, here's the thing. We can do co-creation, formerly known as collaboration, and you can steal other people's goals. You can read their goal and go, that's quite a good one. I'd like to focus on that. Today is about learning the process and the technique. But at each step, don't change your goal. So take a goal. That's step number 1, focus on a specific goal. Second thing is, I need you to choose a point in time. So many people have strategy conversations, and my role as a facilitator is to stop them circling, it's to move them forward, but to get outcomes. And it's because they're talking about a vision or an aim, but not defining when. We want to do strategic planning. Great. Are we talking 100 years forward? Or are we talking 3 years forward? 100 years forward provokes the question, do we want our organisation to outlive ourselves? Can you see how time shifts the conversation? So can everyone pick a time horizon that you're going to be thinking about your goal alongside? It's a point in time in the future. So we're going to do some futurist time traveling. It's another course that I have to do where I show you how to go back in the past and change things that have happened back in the past. So today we're just going to focus on shaping the future. So can I get that in the chat? Before June. Now, a little bit of facilitation. I know it's obvious to you, but Richard, before June of what year? Because it's a great technique, business as usual. We're going to deliver that before June. So giving that specificity. Brilliant. 2021. Are we talking 31 December 2021? Are we talking financial year 2021? By 1 July 2021. I won't go down to what minute, but do you see the importance of this? This isn't about action committing yourself to. So don't freak out about that. This is imagining yourself in that future, visioning forward. Because the next thing I want you to do, select a physical location. So vision means to see. In order to see, you have to have a perspective. In order to have that perspective, you have to be standing in a particular location. There is no right or wrong location. Okay. So take a moment, choose your own physical location. You're welcome to put it in the chat. This is now more about you and your own visioning. I'm not asking you in the next 5 minutes, have a life-changing vision. I'm giving you the technique to begin the thinking around it. So now I want you to take that goal, that moment in time, that place, and imagine what you see. And you've done this before, because it's what we did at the beginning. But can you see how we've given it so much more context? So mind flexing doesn't just mean to randomly let your mind wander. That's the equivalent of going out in a canoe and just thrashing around. It means with deliberate strokes, reading the currents, reading the possibilities. What do you see? I'm going to give you a few minutes to just imagine forward. Keep in mind though, this isn't just about you, this is about leading an organisation forward. And too many people, when they look forward into the future, this is what they see. Sometimes it's out of fear, sometimes it's just an absence. So often they go, oh, my leader needs to be more visionary, they need to give me a vision. No, you don't need to give them a vision, you need to help them be able to see forward. And this is what we're doing here. So unconstrained. Brilliant. 28 people in 6 separate locations, smiling, backslapping, and enthusiastic. Now, this is what I like to call work dreaming. But you have to be very careful about telling your organisation you've just learned how to work dream, because people don't like that word. Daydreaming at work, but hang on, who are the people that change the world? They are the visionaries. So instead, what you're doing is strategic planning with a visionary aspect to it. But here's the challenge. Your vision cannot be the end result. Because if I vision Wayne's outcome, what comes to mind, and you're welcome to chat, Wayne, or put something into the chat, what did you do differently that enabled that outcome? And it can't just be, I gave a great presentation or I compelled them. It's visioning yourself doing something a bit differently, or someone else might like to share.
Yeah, in our case, David, it's a journey. We've been on this journey since the beginning of October, and it's a incremental step-by-step process. As I mentioned, we're introducing Daniel Pink's drive methodology into the organisation, and we're making.
So could you just vision, and sorry, I'm just pausing you there to grab that thought, right? I'm digging into the water now. So that thought, introducing it into the organisation, what do you see as a result? Now tell me about a person, an outcome, a shift.
The shift has been dramatic. I mean, we have greater team engagement across Asia Pacific. So as I mentioned, 6 locations.
Brilliant. And so this is going to be just quite hardcore facilitation in a condensed amount of time. So normally I'd be pausing to listen more. You've just told me about the past. You've told me great engagement. I'm going, great. Now tell me about the future, vision forward. What's something happening differently as a result? What's being done differently?
Okay, so the intent is to take digital learning leadership within our industry. And through this engagement, through this initiative, people are starting to learn and think on their own, through their own initiatives. And that's driving the process forward.
So if I grab that as an example, so can you see here, that's the goal. The goal is to have people learning in that way. The vision might be, I can imagine some of your team in a meeting, 4 people posing a difficult question and someone saying, I don't know the answer to that. Shall we throw that out on our Teams channel or on our Slack channel, right? Or someone going, actually, I've got a scanner here that lets me locate someone of a different ethnicity and age to myself and how close they are. I'll go talk to them. Now, can you see how one of those visions I could launch tomorrow? The other one is a product that would require quite a bit of work, but you go, oh my gosh, if I could have that idea that quickly, it probably already exists. And now I can use leverage thinking to start to see what might be out there and what might be in the world. Now, I mentioned at the beginning, I was going to ask you on our journey through the rapids, what's one thing that you're taking away from here? So an aha moment or an insight or a learning. And if you could put this into the chat, and then I advise everyone, save the chat, copy and paste the chat, because this is where you're now gaining other people's insight. Now, who's gaining most from this? And here's the thing, we actually all are. I'm gaining a heap, right? So when I keynote present and people would come up at the end and say, I love your presentation, I just used to go, thanks. And I felt really good about it. But I can guarantee you what I thought was good wasn't what they thought was good. So now I've learned just to pause and say to someone, oh, that's great. Could I just ask you what it was you liked about it and why? And then Andrea, who works alongside me as a business manager, we double down on those things. So you can see the irony. This is all about dealing with uncertainty, but I gave you a topic list at the beginning. Here's what we're going to cover. And I put slides in between because I know that helps structure thinking. There are amazing things coming up here in the chat. Now, Julia, at this point, I'm sort of happy to start to roll through to a Q&A. I do have an extended mix where I kind of went, there's sort of 5 slides that might be kind of interesting to share, but sometimes the conversation is more useful. If you want these resources, we've just set up a single website address to head across to. So if you go to dave-wilde.com VID, you can say what you'd like. So we've got a MindFlex guide that covers what we've done here today. But we'll also share with you a behind the scenes tool. So this is a future map that I use to help organizations navigate into that future. So we'll give you a copy of that, and it's got some instructions there around how to use it. But from here, Julia, if I maybe hand back over to you, and you can shape our future and guide the conversation whatever direction you want in the last few minutes.
Thanks so much, David. It's such a nice reminder to get really specific. And I think my own reflections of particularly of last year and where we're going is it's really easy just to let the uncertainty sort of take over and almost use it as a reason not to be specific. Whereas you can actually create your own certainty by creating specific goals, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there and the structure of your thinking around it. We had an experience early pandemic days where webinar like this, number of different clients and organizations, and there was a learning and development manager for one of the supermarkets. And you imagine what they were dealing with at that time. But every time we try and take a particular thing to solve, they would go, oh, but there's this as well, and there's this as well, and we're all guilty of it. But what it does is it means you can never land somewhere. So strong ideas lightly held. People debate we need to look 5 years out. No, we need to look 1 year out. It's like, let's just take one of those and play with it for a bit. Great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone's got any questions, now is the time. Dave,
I'd love to ask one if I may, Jules.
Go for it, Chris.
Yeah. Thank you, David. I really like the idea of having a very specific vision that you can see with a time and a place associated with it. Let's say you've created all that for some point in the future. Any tips on making sure that you build towards it? The risk in my mind is that you've built that wonderful picture, but then life carries on as normal and you don't actually get to the vision you've created for yourself.
Yeah.
What should I do tomorrow or now as opposed to in the future?
Yeah, I can share a real behind the scenes story, which is true story. Just yesterday, I was having this debate with my adult son. So I can't call him teenager because he's just turned 20, right? So we're taking some of these things, we're developing a digital version of it. He's actually an interface designer, so he's highly skilled. And he was saying, okay, show me the vision for the product, and actually mocked up screens and content and stuff like that. And I said, this isn't just for business audiences though. This is to help anyone to be able to mind flex. The vision is bigger and broader than that. And he said to me, no, but you can't have that big vision and be too broad. You need to begin somewhere. And we had all these debates about Tesla and Facebook and how they began and with a real specificity, and you have to find your way along there. So I like to think it's like a lot of things in life, yin and yang. You have to have both. And it was the study Good to Great that talked about the genius of and. So yes, you have to have absolutely singular clarity of vision. And you also have to know that your vision's going to change and shift along the way. So someone put into the chat the thing of thinking by doing. And there's all sorts of expressions around it. So Mike Tyson famously said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. But most people don't like taking business advice from Mike Tyson. So there's a Steve Blank of Harvard version where he says that most people talk about being visionary, but in reality, they're hallucinating. So how you find out is you get out of the building. So my thing would be, do that visionary thinking, but then tomorrow, today, start creating something. And so, for example, that's where I'm suggesting to people put things in the chat and write and so on. Julia, I might sort of close out here, but I'll just put something on screen as we close. So this is about moving people through that journey. And we all have resistance. And it's important to have resistance because it's like brakes on a car, but it holds us back in the past. So we need to push through, and we need to go through a quite revolutionary space in order to become future ready. And these are the beliefs and behaviors that pull us back. These are the ones that lift us up. Too often we reflect back on life, and that's really important, but we can't reflect on that future. So responsive ways of working get us closer, but it's still in the present. So it's pushing forward. And I'll leave this up on screen here. So this is quite a lot of information on here. Feel free to take a screenshot. I'll step out of the way. But if you're wondering, and I'll step out of the way one more time, but if you're wondering where does a growth mind flex sit, you can trace it all the way back to when we were hunter-gatherers and we moved into agriculture. Then we had established corporate structures, and then the fourth industrial revolution where digital is now fusing with the physical and things are becoming more autonomous. But to shape the future, we need to think bigger as leaders and as a planet for the ecological needs of everything connecting together. So thank you very much, and I really look forward to experience the future that you've all shaped.
Thanks so much, Dave. Absolute pleasure to hear you speak about the future, but also to get so many great insights from people in the community as well. So I think we will share everything in terms of links in the community for people that are watching this in the playback. So if you didn't grab those links down when Dave mentioned them, we'll put them there as well. Always very generous, Dave, and sending big love from New Zealand. Can't wait to get back to that part of the world again very soon, hopefully sooner than expected.
Brilliant.
So
We will cross that bridge.
we will cross that bridge. Exactly.
Brilliant. Thanks all. Have a brilliant future.